So let me ask you a question, listeners. What are you doing to fulfill the part of the Great Commission that says, "Go ye into all the world"? My name is Dan. I am one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship, and this is Life Talks. And today I've got a great friend, a special guest with us today. This is a guy that I've actually spent more time with in the last 60 days than I've spent with my wife. Well, maybe not quite, but almost. I'm with Bob Williamsen today, and Bob is a dear friend. He is a shepherding elder at Life Fellowship Church, and he also has a heart for missions that absolutely does take me around the world. In fact, over the last 3 years, I've spent at least 6 weeks on the mission field with him. We've had a great time. He and I are about as opposite as we can get. Let me tell you,
this is true.
He is Mr. Extrovert. He took 10,000 pictures when we were in India and Africa one year, and people that I knew I was never going to see again, but he loves people. He loves connecting. He gives out his WhatsApp like I give candy to kids on Sundays. I mean, he is just absolutely one of those people persons, and it's because he loves Christ. It's because he loves the gospel and he loves missions. So, Bob, thanks for coming in and joining us today at Life Talks. We planned this actually when we were in Africa.
We did,
and so most recently we were in Zimbabwe together. But before that, you were in South Africa.
Right. For
earlier this year, you were in India, and you and I traveled to India and Uganda. And last year you were in Uganda.
And India.
And in India.
Yeah.
And the year before, you and I were in India, Uganda. We spent a day in Dubai, and we were in South Africa.
Yep.
So the cool thing, and one of the reasons I wanted you to be on our podcast, Bob, is people look at me and they say, well, of course you're doing this, Dan. You're the missions pastor. You're a pastor. This is what you do. This isn't what you do.
No.
You're a real estate developer.
Right.
And so I want you to kind of talk to us a little bit today about your journey into missions. What was your first missions trip, and how did you get on fire for missions?
Well, we kind of did some stuff with student life way back in the day with the kids, kind of locally and even out of state. And that was a great experience. It was fun being with the kids. But in terms of going overseas and really getting out in the mission field for the first time, that was with you. So that trip to India when you and Larry and all the other guys.
That was your first?
That was my first time.
I had no idea. I thought you traveled like an old trooper.
I do travel a lot, but that was really the first opportunity I've had to go on mission and get out in the field and be with pastors and missionaries. And
so you got the bug then? I
was hooked. So you and I, we spent 31 days on that trip, and was totally hooked on that. But I mean, in this season of life too, I have had a burden for the Great Commission for years, long before I started going. Because I've always felt like the Great Commission says, go therefore, right, and make disciples. And going can mean going overseas. It can mean going to the other side of the world. But I believe, and you and I have talked about this, that going starts in your own home, with your own family, with your kids. It starts in your neighborhood, in your community, your church. So there's plenty of places we can go. And I felt like I was doing that, but I had never gone overseas to really get out in the field and really experience what most of the rest of the world experiences, and I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah. So, but I mean, you're not retired. You're a very busy guy. Yeah. Just trying to get you in here for this podcast has been a challenge. You had to make some adjustments in order to be able to now pursue this passion that God has lit in your heart.
Sure. Yeah, and the cool thing, here's the neat thing about what the Lord can do. He didn't just lay this passion in my heart, but he then made a way that allowed me to do it, which is what I love about him, right? So he put this burden in my heart for missions, but he gave me a whole new career in this thing called real estate development, which we started doing about 7 years ago. And that's another story, maybe another podcast, another time of what God did there in my heart. But I will tell you, he's convinced me that I want to finish my race well. I want to run hard to the end, like Paul said. And part of that is going, right, and making disciples. And so the beauty of what I do now is I have this great flexibility and windows in my schedule where you and I can go for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, different parts of the year, and I can be in the mission field. And then I can come back and I can be doing other work and I can go again. And so for me right now, I'm just so grateful, so thankful that the Lord has really given that opportunity and opened those doors for me. I mean, I'm already looking to go back to Africa, as you know, even in December again. We just got back, and I'm hoping to go back and be with some of our partners over there, right, that you and I both know. So I'm really grateful that God has not only put the burden in my heart, but given me the way to do it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that, though, that you're successful. I mean, that's not a secret. And I don't think it's something that we have to hide. Yeah, you're a successful businessman. The Lord has blessed you with good finances, good leadership opportunities, a profile that you can exploit to use for His glory. But in the midst of that, your attitude toward your success has to shift if you're going to do this. Am I right?
Oh, for sure. Well, a book that I read years ago that really helped change my perspective on that was called Halftime, Bob Buford.
And by the way, if you've not read that book, really, seriously, if you're in your late 30s to early 40s, it ought to be on your required reading list. It's called Halftime by Bob Buford. It is an excellent book as you continue to age in your career. Go ahead.
No, you're exactly right. And that really opened my mind to kind of a different perspective of what am I really doing with my time? So you talk about successful. I don't care about being successful. I want to be significant. And the whole premise of that book, and really the whole premise of our journey, what God has called us to do is living with significance, right? Living with eternity in mind, right? Living with this perspective of whatever I do here matters for eternity. And so, yeah, in the terms of the world's definition of success, I don't really care. What I really do care about, and what God has really burdened my heart over, is this notion of how do I make sure that for whatever days He gives me, and we all know every day was ordained before one of them came to be. So whatever that turns out to be, whether it's 10 more years or 30 more years or 2 days, I don't care. I want to run the race hard, and I want to be living for significance, meaning living for the kingdom, right? Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. That's the way I want to live, right? That's what God's really burdened my heart over these last few years. And the cool thing, Dan, is this season, because you and I are similar in age too. This is the best season of my life by far, not even close. I mean, of course, being with my kids and watching them grow up, that was awesome. But in terms of kind of how I'm using my time and where I can give, whether it's my time, talents, and treasure, being able to do this kind of stuff, it is the most fulfilling, rewarding, joyful thing that I've ever been able to do. And I just want to do this till I can't anymore.
Yep. I really appreciate you saying that, because I think this is an area that I want to challenge my listeners to this podcast, but also to the church in general, is that, there's seasons in life,
That's right.
And there's a season of preparation. There's when you're in college and you're finding the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Then there's that family season where the Lord gives you children and you raise them and you get them launched. But then, there's this Western concept is that we squirrel away money and we save money so that we can quit our jobs and play golf and take cruises during the last 20 or 30 years of our life when we have less responsibility and perhaps more financial success. And yet there's nothing in the Scripture that says retirement ought to be our goal.
No, in fact, but I did find retirement in the Bible. I think I told you this, right?
Yes, yeah.
This is classic. So look up for your listeners, Luke chapter 12, and Jesus tells the parable of this rich man, right? And this rich man who had barns overflowing with grain and resources. And what does he say? He says, I say to myself, soul, we need to build more. We need to do more. So we're going to build bigger barns and we're going to store up more stuff. And then I said to my soul, I'm going to sit back, so I'm going to relax and be merry, right?
I'm going to retire.
That's right. I'm going to retire. I'm going to take it easy. But the next sentence is so important because Jesus said, but God said, you fool, because this very night your life is going to be required of you. And so
here we hear it from Bob Williamsen, if you retire, God will kill you.
Okay, let's edit that out. But I will say this, retirement is definitely not in the Bible. And here's the other thing I know in absolute, no uncertain terms. The more you do for Him in the kingdom, the more fulfilled you are. And I'm telling you, I can't think of a better way to spend this season of life than living on purpose for Him, right? Yeah. I mean, golf is fun. By the way, golf, vacations, all those things, whatever. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Obviously, God gives us those things to enjoy. This isn't about being legalistic about that. But God did give us a very specific command, right? And He said, go and make disciples, right? Go into all nations. Go and make disciples, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them. This is what you and I were doing in Zimbabwe, as we were helping train disciple makers to make disciples, right? Teaching them to obey my commands, and I'm with you till the end of the age. So He told us what to do. He told us to go. He told us to make disciples, and He said, I've got the Holy Spirit who's going to be with you, and now I want you to go do this. So it's not an option, by the way. That was an imperative. That's something He told us to do. So we don't get the option of saying, well, maybe I'll do that, maybe I won't.
Mhm.
If you love Jesus and you're a believer, and he said, if you love me, you'll obey my commands.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what we're to do.
Yeah. The thing that I love about our stage in life, and I don't think it's any secret, you and I are both in our early 60s, and is that we're free to pursue the passions other than family or other than success that are really going to matter in 100 years. So
That's right.
It's an invitation to finish well.
Right. Exactly.
It's an invitation to finish the race and make it matter, the win matter. The cool thing is, and if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your personal journey, is you're not alone. You're not some kind of anomaly. You actually are partnering now and working with other businessmen. And I know you're specifically doing so in India and to some degree in Uganda. But tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's important that successful people have a different network than a blue-collar person. Blue-collar has a different network than a young person. So how is the Lord bringing your network into a shared vision for missions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Dan. I think really it's just as I've moved into this new venture and this thing called land development, I've met new people, doors have opened, I've networked with a completely different group. I mean, this is an absolute 180-degree departure from my whole previous 30-year career, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm learning, I'm starting over, if you will, in terms of a career perspective. And God has opened all these other doors in this new network and this group of people. And it's allowed me to meet people who are like-minded in a field that allows us flexibility with our schedule, but people who have a vision for the kingdom. And again, a vision for finishing well, like our friend Larry, right? Mm-hmm. And so the beauty of that is I can network with these people. They have shared mutual goals. They're strategic. They're leaders. They want to see kingdom impact. And so together we get to really challenge each other and say, what and how can we be used, Lord, to do stuff in a big way for the kingdom? What does that look like? And it's just like the whole thing we talk about in Proverbs 27:17, right? Iron sharpening iron, so one man sharpens another. And that's the beauty of these kind of relationships. And so, yeah, that's opened a bunch of doors, which has then opened doors with ministry partners all over the world.
Right.
And so I just love that. And that's why I want to get back to Africa in a month and a half to go see our friends, including our friends that we were just with in Zimbabwe. Right.
So flesh out, if you would, a little bit more, just what that looks like in practical terms. You mentioned our mutual friend, Larry, and he's a very, very successful land developer. He used to own car dealership, correct? Yep. And he's in his 70s, so he's a decade ahead of us.
Right.
And yet, I mean, you and I traveled with him. I mean, I couldn't keep up with the man.
True.
And if you're an extrovert, this man is off the chart.
That's right.
He can't walk by somebody without saying, "Do you know Jesus?"
That's right.
And it's really incredible. He's got such a winsome personality. But he's basically setting up a legacy. Talk to us a little bit about what it means if you have means, or if you have your network of connections. What does living with a legacy in mind look like?
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to this issue again, even of halftime success versus living for significance, right? And really, at the end of your journey, what do you want people to remember you for? I don't care about this stuff here. What I care about is what are the legacy, right? The things that we're doing that have an eternal impact, right? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So really, it's all about how can we sow and build into these ministries and these partnerships that will last beyond us through my kids, as these other local partners, indigenous people, in whether it's in India or Uganda or Zimbabwe or South Africa, wherever the case might be, who have a shared vision, and we can add value. We can come alongside and pray and encourage and help and support. And that, to me, that's the legacy, right? These are ministries that live on. These are ministries that will continue to invest long-term because they have an eternal perspective, right? They're seeking first his kingdom. And so, yeah, that's just the way of kind of how we order things. So it's just a function now. You and I talked about this in some of our discipleship stuff in Zimbabwe, is what does it really look like to seek first his kingdom? And how do we prioritize, make that our priority, and let the other things kind of fall into place? I
just want to make it even more practical and to say this, that you're in my stage of life. We've got more in the taillights than we do in our headlights.
Yeah.
We know that if we live an average lifespan, we've got a couple more decades left. And so we have to also think about folding our tent, what the legacy is. And you and I talked about this in Africa. Larry's talked about this with you. He's formed this group called Hope for Asia.
India.
I'm sorry, I said, Hope for India. There is a different Hope for Asia, and I always get the two mixed up. Hope for India, whereupon he's going to pour a substantial amount of his resources during this phase of his life where he has basically everything to live comfortably for the rest of his life. He doesn't have to work. He didn't have to, but he's, a lot of times we spend so much time saying, I want to leave a big inheritance for the next generation, but we don't give any thought to how that inheritance should best be applied. And, research shows that the typical young person who receives a massive inheritance often squanders it. In fact, there's a huge percentage that within a year, if they've received a certain range of inheritance, it's gone.
Right.
They'll go out and buy a house, buy a car, take a big vacation, and then it's gone. And it breaks my heart. It would break my heart, and my estate's planned where this can't happen, won't happen, to think that I've sacrificed, I've saved, I've worked extra jobs to leave a little bit behind, and to know that a lot of the things that it gave my energy to in terms of missions and ministry would stop when I die. And so the concept of legacy living and significance living says we have an opportunity, if we're smart enough to take it, to set up our estate in such a way. And I'm going to leave my kids money and my grandkids, but I'm also going to remember what I spent my life on. And I'm going to be able to give them even more, or the legacy I hope to reach even more because I've thought about it and I've planned on it. So would you agree with me in saying that, one of the responsibilities we have as we reach this season in life is to start thinking in that direction?
Yeah. I mean, and so I think, so what's that legacy look like then? I think what I'd like to leave with my kids more than anything is a passion for missions. Mm-hmm. To me, the most important legacy I can leave with my kids is how do we invest into eternity, right? Not stuff that we're keeping because it's staying here. Whatever you keep here is staying here, right? So the larger question, the legacy to me is, how do I teach and help my kids and friends and colleagues and other ones recognize that, Jesus said, store up your treasures in heaven, right? Where moth and rust do not destroy and thieves cannot break in and steal, right? Don't store it here on earth. So my whole premise is, my legacy is I want to store up treasures in heaven, and I think there's plenty of scriptural biblical examples of what Jesus was talking about. When we lay up treasure in heaven, we have a reward waiting for us there, right? So my objective is not to leave much money behind. My objective is to push it all ahead, right, as much as possible. And I would encourage anybody who's listening out there, as you think about your kids and your family, you want to do some things for your family for sure. And is that good? And yes, I get all that. But at the same time, God has given us these great opportunities to really lay up, and he's given us clear direction to lay it ahead, to put it ahead for us, right? And he promises a 30, 60, or 100-fold return on that in heaven, right? So when I think about Shepherd and Malie and Emmanuel and Carol and our other friend, these are just, and Pastor Abraham, who was just here, and others who have been with us and that we're partnering with, by investing into them and the good work that they're doing and that their people are doing, that's how that legacy continues. I was on a conversation with our friend Carol the other day. She said they have 500 indigenous missionaries ready to go out in the field, trained, but they don't have the resources to send them yet, right? So the harvest is plentiful. The laborers are few. She's got laborers there. We just need the funding so they can get out in the field, right? And take the gospel to the ends of Africa, right? And so those are the things that get me excited. And that's the beauty of, when I think of legacy, that's what I'm thinking of. Right?
And the thing is, of all people, believers ought to be thinking about this.
Exactly.
It frustrates me to no end. Warren Buffett said, I'm not leaving my money to my kids.
Right.
Bill Gates said, I'm not leaving my money to my kids. I mean, I can name you celebrity as an arm's length worth. He said, I'm not leaving my money to my kids. I earned my money. They can earn their money. But what I am going to do is try to change the world even after I'm gone.
That's right.
And so, Gates, I mean, he's not my kind of guy, but he is vaccinating people across Africa at a rate that's saving tens and hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives, because that's his passion. My passion is Jesus. My passion is truth. So I don't have Bill Gates' money, not even a tiny fraction of it. But what I do have, I'm accountable for. So I really hope you'll listen to that from us today. If you're listening to this podcast, is give some careful thought, not only thought, but take some action on what legacy living, significance living looks like for you. Bob, one more question I want to ask before our time's up for this episode, and that is this. I find myself constantly challenged when I'm on the mission field because my perspective is completely different. Things that irritate me here, it's a way of life there. Right. And opportunities that we take for granted here are, works of God and absolute miracles there. But you don't really get that perspective unless you go.
For sure.
What is it? What are some things you wish the church in America, or the Bob Williamsen who's sitting in his congregation and he's now 58 years old and he's never been on a missions trip, what do you wish they would experience or learn or know about getting involved in missions that might change their life?
Yeah, well, it's a big question. I would just say this. When you go, if you first of all, you got to open your mind and get out of your comfort zone, right? And you got to be willing to go. And if you do that, I can promise you, when you do and when you go, your eyes are going to be open, but your heart's going to be open. You're going to see and experience and meet people and see how they live and how they interact and how hungry they are for the Word of God. This is the amazing thing. There's such a hunger for the Word of God in almost every other part of the world, right? And when you see that and you experience that and you get to come alongside these people and love on them, there's not a better place. There's no other place really I'd rather be than with them, right? It's just so encouraging. And so if you go and you do that, I can promise you, God will change your mind. He'll change your heart, and you'll want to do more and more of it. And you'll be anxious to get on the next trip. That's the beauty of going. That's one of the great beauties of going. We go because we want to serve Him, but at the same time we go, and as much as we want to bless those people, I know this, when I come back from those trips, I always, Dan, my cup is always overflowing when I come back.
Yeah. Well, Bob, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us about this today. And the thing I hope you're taking away, listeners, from this episode is this. Don't wait for someone to invite you. Jump in. Find a way. Look for a partner. Ask around. Take the risk. Write the check. Clear your schedule. You got to eventually get to a point where you put feet to your desires. And when you do this, you will never be the same. And by the way, you don't have to be a professional pastor. You don't have to be a millionaire. All you got to do is be willing, and God will make it possible. And you will be able to experience, see, and be a part of things that you never dreamed you could be. Folks, it's always good to have you listening to us here at Life Talks. Thank you so much for doing so. If you ever have questions or comments, or you want to follow up with us in any way, or you want to offer suggestions for another episode, you can contact us at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. Please share us with your friends on social media and anywhere that you possibly can. Leave us a review on where you listen to your podcast. Until next time, thanks as always for joining us here at Life Talks.